So hi, I would like first to thank the association to inviting me, and Joe is not here, but I was really flattered when she invited me, and I said, really, are you sure you want me to talk? And she said, yes, I want, and now I'm really nervous. So I will not repeat everything, but yes, I'm almost done with the PhD. I submitted my dissertation in September, and now I'm waiting. And I just started a postdoctoral with the Polish Center for Holocaust Research in Warsaw, and in collaboration with la Fondation pour la Mémoire de la Shoah à Paris. So today I will try to explain to you my last 5 years. So this is not the exact title of my dissertation, Justice as Witness, New Perspective on Polish-Jewish Relations During the German Occupation, 1939-1942. The dates are important. I'm working on the first year of the war only, not the second part, not the deportation part and after, only the previous part. So, yeah, I will start. I want this talk to be really casual, so if you have any questions, I know I talk really fast because I'm nervous. You just raise your hands or yell at me. That's okay with me. I want to talk about the process of the research before talking about the dissertation in itself. When I started my PhD in 2014, Holocaust historians were already engaged in a big fight regarding the place of the bystanders in the Holocaust in Poland. By bystanders, I mean Poles, Catholic Poles who lived there and who during 6 years watched their neighbors, Jews, being treated badly and killed by the Nazis. In 2001, historian Jan Gross wrote a book, Neighbors, that I'm sure you're familiar with. Neighbors discussed the situation of the small town Jedwabne, a town that was near, it's 80 kilometers northeast Warsaw, and in the summer, in July 1941, in Jedwabne, the local population, the Polish population, killed all the Jews of the town. They put them in a barn, they put the barn on fire, and that was it. So Gross highlights this history saying, you know, the bystanders are not bystanding. Sometimes they did stuff too. And the huge fight started, and it's still on today. The question is, did the Poles participate to the Holocaust? Did they collaborate with the Nazis? Did they collaborate because they were forced to, or because they have a political or an ideological agenda? And I was already in this history because I did my MA on the topic, but I didn't want to be a part of this fight for many reasons, because it's too controversial, and because my Polish is not that good. You know, you have to speak Polish to be a part of the Polish fight. And my Polish is my third language, so it's okay, I can read. I don't want to discuss in Polish. So my advisor, Jan Grabowski, told me maybe you could use in historical sources, some documents that are easier to read for you. And he said, do you think something like administrative, like the judicial sources, you know, sources from the court, it's always formed, it's framed, it's easy to read. Start with that. And I read a lot about the judicial system in Poland during the war, and I noticed that I will read a little bit because otherwise I will just because of the severity of the terror under the German occupation, we tend to forget that a part of the Polish administration was still in place during the war. After the invasion of Poland in September 1939, and following the establishment of the Generalgouvernement in occupied Poland, the Germans established a two-tier justice system with the idea of creating a colonial administrative structure within occupied Poland. In February 1940, Hans Frank, the Gouverneur General, decided that certain segments of the Polish administration, which was in place before the occupation, would continue to function as before the war. Therefore, the Nazi allowed Poles to make decisions concerning selected spheres of administrative life. One branch almost entirely left in the hand of Poland was its justice system and associated legal and administrative apparatus, meaning the police force, every member of the court, people working in prison. They were working before the war in this apparatus, and during the war they just regained the right to do their job. With the exception of Jews, who were just banned from every system. So without an efficient, because the Germans were not interested in small criminality in Poland, so without an efficient or visible German oversight and without German interest in that particular area, Polish officials of justice retain influence and power over Poles and Jews involved in all kinds of litigation. As we know, from the beginning of the war, the German authorities separate the Jews from the rest of the Polish populations. It involves the new restrictive regulation directed against the Jew, as well as the formation of the ghetto. The first ghetto was already created in October 1939. After the introduction of Nazi regulation that banned Jews from leaving these restricted areas, the Polish court became one of the very few places where Poles and Jews can meet and discuss and work together to solve problems as before the war. So the administrative system of the occupied Poland was, we can say that even if the Second Republic of Poland disappeared with the German occupation, it still existed in a way, because the same judges, the same lawyers, the same police officer, prison guards worked together without any interference of the German and without having the Polish state over them to look at them. So this research, my research, has started with the exploration of archival documentation, which has been largely absent from previous research concerning the Holocaust in Poland, the court record. To create an exhaustive portrait of the social and legal situation at the time, I had to understand first how the legal system was created in Poland before the war. The Second Republic of Poland was considered as a model of democracy. I don't know if you know about that. Just to, like the Constitution of 1921, the March Constitution was based on the French Constitution. The rights, women's rights in Poland in 1980 were already, like they had the right to vote. In Canada, it's in the same year. In France, I think it's after the war. So just to see how 1945. So it was liberalism, it was freedom, but still in this constitution, even with the beauty of the French Constitution behind and the beauty of the letters, it remains a constitution where Catholic Poles were dominant and where other minority were down. The system of justice logically was based on this constitution. Stanislaw Frankowski, is a specialist of the Polish administration of justice, wrote that the Criminal Code of 1932, which was in use during the war, and was created for the Second Republic of Poland, he said that the code adopted the principle of subjectivation of guilt well as of punishment. The courts were given a wide discretion to decide what would be just and fair after full consideration of a given case, and were advised to take into account the individual characteristic of the accused as well as the circumstances which led them to commit the criminal act. In other words, it means that the criminal code gave a lot of power to judges who can decide to follow or not the letter of the law. So this was before the war. Now, can you imagine how, when the German arrives and they give back the power to these officials, the officials can take this power to do whatever they want with that. They can abuse of power over the population, or they can do their job as they did before the war. So there's a libre arbitre that is involved now in the community of the judicial system in Poland. So following the liberal spirit of the constitution, the criminal code, no, I already said that, sorry. When I said, it's like a parenthèse, when I said that the Jews were not equal citizens even in the constitution, I think this picture is talked by itself. You see, this is there. It's a district court. There's 3 judges. There's the suspect here, and what did you see in the middle? It's the big cross. So even if you were a Jew, you had to talk in front of these judges and like the cross. And I think I don't know how to explain that more than just look at it. Everything is in that picture. Okay. So the German entered Poland in 1939. They said to Poles, you can regain the right to have your own system of justice. There were 4 different levels of justice in Poland at the time, before the war. So municipal court, district court, Supreme Court, and the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court. The Germans said, the 3 first level, you keep it. There's no more Supreme Court because it's a constitutional court and there's no more Polish constitution. There's no more Polish state. So this one was banned. But the other 3 levels remain in place. The difference between the 3 levels of court is easy. The first one, the municipal court, treat crimes like small criminality, like thief, some kind of assault, some fight between citizens. The district court, so it's other criminals who go there, people who are condemned of 10 years in prison or more, death penalty, and the appellate court is the Court of Appeal. So both first and second court can go to the other one if there's a problem with the judges. So for my research, because in occupied Poland, there were more than 100 courts everywhere in the territory. So I had to choose. Sorry, I just lost this. Right. Because there were more than 100 courts in function in occupied Poland during the war, 25 only in the Warsaw district. I chose 3 different courts to do my research on. So one municipal court of the city of Otwock, the district court of Siedlce, and the appellate court of the capital. The court records reveal that the legal procedure during the German occupation remained largely unchanged from before the war. Germans rarely, if ever, showed up in this court, and because of the nature of the relevant litigation, the court document offers us a glimpse of the everyday under the occupation, as well as the evolving relationship between Jews and Poles, and about the condition of the Jewish society at the time of extreme peril and poverty. So it's not only about legal history, administrative history. Through the court document, you can see how the people used to live during the occupation, but with this feeling that it was exactly the same before, because it's a sphere, and I will repeat that. I repeat that in my dissertation, and I will repeat that today. It's a sphere without any German. Germans never went to court, even when they were asked for. They don't care. If there's no German involved in a case or a German regulation, they just didn't go. So it's a kind it's Poland during the occupation, but without the occupant. And it's interesting to see that in that way, because it's exactly like that. Like the judges, the people in front of the court talk. The Germans are never like questions. We never talk about the occupation or the war. It's people in court solving problem like thief problem, like he insulted me. So it's really the everyday life of Jews and Poles, but under the occupation. So before giving you some like a taste of my chapter, I had to, before starting my research, I had to first understand how the Second Republic of Poland was created and what was the place of the Jews before. I already said that. I already had to know if Jews were criminal before the war. So I made some statistics from the war. Sorry. Okay.
Marie-Dominique, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Were the Jews, they have the right to be a plaintiff in the...
Yes.
Yeah, they did.
Yes, it was. It's really like it was before, like the court. It's interesting because I forgot to mention, you know, Jews were placed in ghettos, and the court, because it was a Polish court, was outside, and they had the right to cross the wall to go to court,
Okay.
not to do other stuff, but they had the right to, like they needed a permission from the Judenrat, but this permission in hand, they can travel everywhere to go to court. They had to be there, but yes. It's really because there were no interest from the German. We just didn't want to take care of that. But so before the war, there's some, because it's complicated to have statistics from before the war because, as you know, the Second Republic of Poland was established in the 1980s from 3 different empires. Yes?
Sorry, I missed the beginning. Can you tell us on what jurisdiction the Polish courts were operating?
What do you mean?
Who was the main power in the occupied territory?
The main power?
Yeah.
I will skip that and we'll go. There. Is that what you're looking for? If you have occupied Poland, you have a governor. Hans Frank was the governor general. He has, in 1939, you had 4 districts in Poland, in occupied Poland, Warsaw, Krakow, Lublin, etc. And so there's a governor per district. And after that, you have that. So the governor will name the police judges member of the court.
Okay, so they weren't fully independent.
And but what's interesting is that these people work at the same time for the Polish jurisdiction and for the German one. So if you, by example, if you have a police officer is working in the street, he has to enforce 2 kinds of regulations. He has to be sure that Poles respected the Polish codes, but also the German ones. So if he arrested the Pole in the street because the Pole was fighting with somebody else, if there's no German implied in the situations or no German regulations, he will send the criminal in the Polish jurisdiction. If, by example, there's a German involved or a German regulation, it's supposed to go to the German court. So they have, and that's why I said that these officers, the officials of these Polish administrations, has full power on the territory.
And you know who they're appointed by? Who was appointing the judges?
They were already appointed before the war. It was the same.
Okay, so
They just said, "Oh, you came back to work." So they just, except for the Jews. The Jews were.
I'm not scared of you backing up in the walls.
Sorry.
From what I know, there were shuffles. There were some shuffles in the system, so they were appointed. New judges were appointed.
Not in occupied Poland. It was the same just as before the war. And I know because I work only on 3 courts, but it's the same judge as before the war. They just returned to work. In the Warsaw district, there was before the war something like, I think it's 1,000. It's Jewish lawyers and judges, but they were kicked out. But the rest it remains the same, because you needed the Germans were not interested in Polish like justice. Okay, right. But it's also because a lot of Poles did not talk German. The German did never talk Polish. So they had to find a way. So with these judges, they say you have 2 kinds, you have 2 codes to enforce, and you decide where to send someone. But that's true that there's Polish, it was not judges, but they hired Poles to work in the German court, so they can translate, so they can talk with other people. But is that okay?
Yeah.
Can I answer your question? So I will just go back to statistics. So before this is the first one. Yes. Before the war, it's difficult to have statistics about the Jewish criminality or just about criminality because there were, until 1980, there were 3 different criminal codes working in Poland at the same time in the Polish territory because it was from the empire. But when Poland regained its freedom in 1980, they created one code, criminal code, and I know that like there was one statistic said that the Jewish community represents something that's less than 10%, which is logical because Jews represented 10% of roughly of the population. But what's interesting, so I have the statistics for the 2 principal courts I worked on. So the municipal court at Fusk, you have the number of accused per year. So obviously there's more Poles than Jews because again, the Jewish population was around 10%. But what is interesting is that you see that in 1941, there's a lot more Jewish criminals, than in 1939, which means that Jews were not criminal, but they became criminal because of the war situation, which is logical. We can see, the most common crime for the same period, we have it's 3 categories. So offense against public authorities and office, offense against public order, acquisition and sale of stolen goods. This one is the bigger one because obviously people try to sell things to buy food. And offense against property. We can see roughly the same number in the district court of Sieradze. So the statistic says the same thing. So Jews were there's more criminality in 1941 because it was the worst period of the war. Considering that in 1942 the deportation started, so there's less Jew because there's no more Jews. So, and because the war, my statistics started in September 1939, so at the end of 39. But so the year to compare are really 40 and 41. And just so you have a look, so the most common crime resolved at the Sieradze court. So offense against public order, acquisition of sale of stolen goods. The same offense against life and health. This is assault, and offense against health, corporal injury, and death. And offense against property. So that's okay, it's just some statistics. So, after knowing a lot about the Second Republic of Poland, after looking at the statistics from before and during the war, I can say that my research, I found that the Polish court during the war can be divided in 3 main levels of analysis. So the administrative one, the legal one, and the social one. The administrative one is regarding the creation, how the code was created, how the constitution was written, based on what. Did the Jew have the same right as Paul? Stuff like that. On a legal point of view, you can see that the relation between the court member and other institutions involved in the process of justice and the Jews, what kind of crimes is committed, the day, the year, like the statistics I just showed you. And maybe the most interesting part is the social level, where we can see the relations between Jews and Paul under this, as I said, this sphere of occupation without the occupant. It's a ground level. So the relation between the Poles and Jews, but also between the officials, the Polish officials and the Jews, before the mass deportation. It's interesting to see that it's really before the mass deportation because everything was already in place in 1942. Like the relation that we hear, as I said before, the big historiography of the Holocaust in Poland today, and the fight is about the relation between Poles and Jews during the mass deportation and after. We talked a lot about what happened to the Jews who survived the camp and tried to survive outside. They needed help from Poles, but sometimes they were killed by Poles. But it didn't happen in 1942. Poles didn't say in 1942, so okay, we will try to kill most of the Jews. It was already something that anti-Semitism was already there before the war. So, and it's visible, and it's visible in the court record from the beginning of the war. Okay, so I will try to demonstrate, and if you have questions, you're welcome, because it's been already 30 minutes. On the administrative and legal perspective, I talked a little bit about the police officers and the judges. What is interesting to see sorry. It's how they treated the Jews and the Poles in court. I know again that my advisor Jan Grabowski wrote a book about the Polish police. I don't know if you hear about it, the Blue Police, who collaborated a lot with the German and who they were organized to kill the Jews. And in his book, the sources he used is a lot of testimonies and testimonies from survivors, so people who survived the camp and the Judenjagd, the hunt for the Jew. But when you read the court record, every court record has one or more police officers involved, because they're the one who arrested criminals in the street, they're the one who went to a conflict in a house, they are always around, and they have full power over the population, Polish or Jewish. And I just wanted to give you a few examples of how the police officer worked in the Warsaw district. So, because there were no interference of the German, again, they can decide what to do with a criminal. There's a lot of cases in Otwock where the Polish police arrested Jews outside the ghetto. The Jew is already in conflict because he's supposed to go to the German court, because he's not supposed to be outside the ghetto without any permission. So the police will arrest the Jew and send him to the Polish court saying that, oh, he assaulted me. It happens a lot. Why? We don't know. And you see that he's not respecting the law. He's supposed to send the Jews at the German court. But he decided otherwise. Why? So the Jew can be treated in the Polish court and go to the prison to pay fees at the court. And it happens a lot. So the police officers have full power over the populations, and it's not a full power, I can have money from you. It's a full power, I can decide if you go, like if you live or you die. And other cases that we see a lot in the district court this time is Jews are arrested for bribing an officer. And in their testimony they said, but the officer came to my home saying that if you give me money, I will stop the process of justice for you, because he was arrested previously for thief or something really like a crime. Sorry?
Shakedown.
Yeah. So, and they have a lot, so they have money. The Jew obviously will give the money. Sometimes it's something like 100 zlotys, not that much. So